Hey guys, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to Wake Up Wednesdays. So, wake up. You guys know what we do here. This is where we lift up our heads midweek, we recalibrate, and we re energize towards our plan. And the way that we do that is we pick up our GSD list right here, which is our Get Stuff Done list, and we check against outcomes, not just to dos. Because if we're just going from to do to do to do, from meeting to meeting to meeting, from queue to queue to queue, we get to the middle of the week and we don't actually get anything done. So this is our opportunity to reinvigorate one another, to jump in midweek, to lift our heads up, to recalibrate towards our plan. So wake up. I want to talk to you guys today about an article that I posted this weekend. I'm just going to pull up my notes here to make sure I give you the most important information. Okay, here it is. So the article was entitled, How Will Your AI Team Move Fast Without Losing Trust? And this is one of the most important topics that pertains to AI. And yes, we can get on board with the latest and greatest and talk about the latest acronyms and blah, blah, blahs. But what's important is that we build trust with our teams, with our stakeholders, and with our clients. And that's what we're going to talk about today. How we can still move fast and make progress with AI, but do it while building trust. And that's the biggest problem that people are facing right now. It's how to not reduce quality, but increase trust. So Atlassian reports that 89% of executives say AI has increased the speed of work, but only about 6% feel that they can point to an organization-wide return on investment. It's a big challenge. People aren't sure how to measure the value that they're actually getting from this, and that's going to reduce trust. So faster work leads to decision fatigue. So it's not just about doing work faster. So a quote here from Michael Laurie, the Chief Catalyst Officer at Bayer, who's in charge of PMI's Pulse of Profession for 2026, says that traditional project management systems no longer are fit for purpose to help organizations navigate the speed and complexity of the environment which we're now all operating in. And so the long and short of that is we need to rethink the way that we're working. And AI can help us produce more, but we still need to come together as a team to decide what good looks like, what matters, and when to stop. So here's a couple questions you can ask yourself and ask your team to think about, and some do's and don'ts. So the first thing you want to ask, number one, is what are the outcomes you're actually accelerating? What are the outcomes you're actually accelerating? And so if the answer is simply just more and more output, more tickets, more summaries, more prototypes, this does not automatically create value. And so here are some do's. Do make sure you define the customer or business outcome before choosing the right AI use case. What does the client want? Do you even understand that? Set one measure that shows whether it improved the work. So this is where we think about objectives and key results. How are we actually measuring success? And connect the work back to those objectives and key results. Here are some things you do not want to do. Don't count, well, X amount of percentage of team is using it, and we use Y amount of prompts and Z amount of features. Those are what I call glamour or fluff matrix metrics. They don't really tell us anything. Don't just build an AI feature because say, well, OpenAI does this, Anthropic does it, Google Gemini does it. Don't just build a feature because everyone else is doing it. Maybe that feature turns out to be a flop, and now you're the last one to find out. And don't confuse busy work with meaningful progress. Now, this is something way before AI. I worked with executives the majority of my career, and they would turn their monitor around and say, look, Mark, look. They basically say, look at how important I am. I'm in back-to-back meetings all day. I'm double and triple booked. Being busy and confusing everyone doesn't mean that you're making meaningful progress. So one of the tips you can use is Atlassian Rovo. They have a customer insight tool that you can actually synthesize customer feedback, define a data source, and you can ask it customer problems and go back and forth based on the real customer feedback. All right, the next question you want to ask yourself or your team, number two, is who has the final decision? Who has the final call? My professor used to say, you have to understand in the room who has the D. The D stands for decision, people. Who has the final call? Who has the decision? You need to know that. And sure, AI can draft, recommend, classify, and summarize, but it cannot become the invisible owner of a release customer decision or a risk call. Certainly not a customer decision, and certainly not a risk call. So here are some do's. Do name a human owner, a human being like Mark Manfredo, for example, for every AI-enabled agent, workflow, or skill that runs autonomously. Who's in charge of it? Give it a person, give it a name. Make the approval and escalation path clear before the launch. So when it fails, know who you're going to escalate to that's a real human being and what you're going to do. Have some kind of process around it. And give users a simple way to flag a bad result. So if you release a product and it's a customer-facing product, and maybe it's a chatbot or maybe it's a workflow, have a little button right there constantly that they can always just press on a scale of 1 to 5 with very simple questions. They can submit that feedback very quickly to you. All right, so maybe it's 1 to 5, how would you rate this interaction? 5 being the best, 1 being the least. And if anyone rates an interaction for a 3 or less, it automatically prompts them, would you like to leave feedback? A couple sentences or two, and then you get that immediately, and you can then act on it instead of react. So here's some things you don't want to do. You don't want to assume that somebody else is reviewing the output. If you haven't defined an owner, you're just making assumptions, and you don't want to assume. You know what they say about assumptions. Don't hide an AI process that the team can't explain. So maybe AI is doing something a little funky, or maybe you're testing something out and you haven't told anyone yet. Tell people before you roll out an AI-enabled process, not after. And don't let accountability disappear because the recommendation came from a tool. So yes, AI is the smartest thing, dual PhD type of intelligence. But just because it recommended something doesn't mean that you aren't accountable. When we think about a RACI matrix, it may be responsible for the work, but a human being is still accountable. So what is the AI tool and tip for this? Once again, here, the theme here is use Atlassian's Rovo. They have something called a decision director for RACIs and DACIs to clarify who's the driver, approver, contributor, informed stakeholder, who's responsible, accountable, consulted, approved, so that it's visible to everyone who the actual human being is that signs off before the end launch. The third question you want to ask yourself and your team is, how will you know the output is good or good enough? How do you actually measure good? Just because I think it's good doesn't mean that everyone thinks it's good, doesn't mean the client thinks it's good. So how do you define it? Quality cannot be a feeling after the demo. So I've seen this a lot. A lot of guys will do a demo and like, how does everybody feel about this? And they try and get everybody excited to push things over the line, to be aggressive and push things. And feel is important, for sure. But you need to define what those end outcomes are and what good and bad look like instead of just going off feelings, because that can change. So here are some do's. Test real examples, real edge cases, and know what bad inputs look like. Review accuracy, usefulness, safety, and consistency. Right? So what's going to be your safety measure? What's going to be your accuracy measure? And set clear thresholds for mandatory human review. So what is your percentage failure rate? Is it 2%? Is it 0.2%? At what point in the process is the human going to be in the loop? You need to set that ahead of time, know what that is, and socialize and agree to that. Here are some things you don't want to do. So don't test only things that you know people are going to like and get excited about. You already know the result of that. Don't just only test that. Don't accept polished language as proof of correct reasoning. So just like human beings, AI can sound very sophisticated and very polished. But in my experience, the more sophisticated, the more polished someone sounds, usually the more under the covers and under the hood you have to investigate. So the same is true for AI. Don't just accept polished and pretty language. And don't launch without getting feedback and sign-off from your stakeholder base. You need to make sure you get sign-off from all the relevant parties. So what's your AI tool and tip? Sticking with the Atlassian Rovo theme, they have a product requirements guide that's going to help you draft acceptance criteria, add specific quality, failure points, and have SMEs review the document before you sign off on it. So that can be your artifact, your product requirements document, and Rovo can help you do that. And the fourth and last question you want to ask yourself and your team is, what will make you pause and stop? So like we talked about human in the loop, like we talked about understanding what your margin for error is. What are the stopping points that you know ahead of time, or as much as you can, because you can't know everything. Some of it is testing, but what are the things that are going to make you stop ahead of time? So a strong launch is not the end of the work. Deciding in advance what signal will trigger a fix, rollback, or even rethink. So here are some do's. Do track errors, overrides, customer feedback, and unexpected outcomes with an emphasis on customer feedback. You have to constantly be gathering. Set a regular review rhythm after a release. So old school way of thinking was we had a 2-week sprint. After that sprint, we had a sprint retrospective. Every couple of weeks, we would do a demo. After that demo, we would review, and so on and so forth. The reason why I say that's the old school way of thinking is now you can go from design to prototype to release in a matter of hours or days. So having a 2-week interval may be too long. Maybe you want to do this every 2 days. Depending on your shop, maybe you're doing it every 2 hours. I don't know. It depends on how quickly you're releasing products and what your error rate is. And the last thing you want to do is make it safe for the team to say it's not working yet. This comes back to psychological safety. We talked a lot about that. You can't be a dictator. You can't make people feel the pressure just because you're feeling pressure, you're under pressure. You're supposed to alleviate the pressure, put the pressure on your shoulders so that people feel comfortable to speak up. The worst scenario is people are afraid to talk to you. There's a problem. They knew the problem was there, and then it blows up in your face because they didn't feel comfortable talking to you. That's the worst mechanism. So, which brings us into our don'ts. Here are some don'ts. Don't wait for a major incident before checking the data. Preventative maintenance. Don't wait for the car to break down on the side of the road before you realize, well, I guess I should, I guess I should have addressed that smoking engine kind of thing. Don't keep pushing a workflow that people don't trust. This is a tricky one because sometimes when you're working with different stakeholders and they're concerned with feel, sometimes their feel is off. So if they tell you they don't trust something, the best way to counteract this is evidence. Show them actual testing evidence in a testing environment that passed all the use cases, and that will help to move forward. And don't treat an experiment that needs revision as a failure to the team. Things are supposed to fail. That's why it's an experiment. If the assumption is that everything is going to pass, then for what purpose is the experiment there for, right? So things should fail. Failure is a good thing because failure shows us that the experiment was good, and these are the things we need to fix. So in line with our theme of using Atlassian Rovo, if you haven't caught on yet, use Rovo. Try something called Jira Delivery Agent to surface delivery risks and turn Jira activity into updates. And you can have this run once a week if you like. Okay, so let's wrap that up to go and give you 3 call to action points. The goal of AI is not to move slower. AI is moving fast, and you don't want to slow it down. You want to continue to move fast, but you want to move fast with it the right way. So the goal is to make that fast, that speed, dependable, trustworthy, and know what outcomes you're accelerating. Not more just for the sake of more, but what's the end outcome we want to achieve. Put humans in the loop, make sure there is a human owner for everything. So when you think about a RACI or a DACI, who's accountable? The machine, the AI may be responsible for executing the actual work, but who's accountable for it? And that'll ensure you have checkpoints along the way. You want to define your quality measurements or your objectives and key results and sub KPIs before you start, and be ready to pause when someone in the team or a signal that you set up doesn't look right. So don't just say, hey, this is the deadline. We need to hit the deadline. We need to get this to the client. The client doesn't want you to give them a crappy product. So you need to pull back a little bit, pull back, better quality and less quantity, so to speak. All right, so what's your call to action? 3 very important things. The first thing is pick one AI workflow your team uses today and give it a human owner. All right, so human owner, for example, like I said, is like Mark. You're going to say, this is the AI workflow, this is the agent, and Mark is in charge of these agents, or Mark is in charge of these workflows. Set up your KPIs, you set up your OKRs, and you make sure a human is in the loop, okay? Define one quality measure and one measurable before your next release. So talk about that, objective key results, KPIs, and schedule. The third and most important thing is schedule a 30-minute review to decide what would what would change to make you pause, stop, or fix the workflow, okay? So know what that is ahead of time. Okay, Well, guys, thank you so much for taking this time on Wake Up Wednesdays to wake up, to review outcomes against your GSD list, and to think about moving fast with AI, but also moving in a trustworthy way. If you have any questions, as always, please feel free to reach out. Let's talk again soon, and remember to hustle harder. Bye-bye.